The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a cold glow on rows of cereal boxes and canned goods. Emily reached for a box of oats, her mind drifting to dinner plans when she saw him. At first it didn't register, just a man, just a face. But then something deeper stirred. A chill ran down her spine, the air thickened, and the box slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. The man turned at the sound. He smiled, polite, familiar. Her heart stopped, the scar under his eye. The way he tilted his head, the eyes empty yet calculated. It was him. 15 years ago, Emily had been the only one to crawl out of that basement alive. The news had called it a miracle. The police had never caught him. Her memories were shattered fragments, blood, darkness, screams. And now he stood 3 feet away, picking up a can of soup. Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All the years of therapy, of building a new life, cracked in a single instant. She had survived once. But now, with the killer in front of her, she had to make a new choice. Run, confront, or disappear forever. Before we dive deeper into Emily's chilling encounter, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we share true stories of survival and transformation that you won't find anywhere else. Be part of this journey. One choice, one voice can change everything. Don't miss what's coming next. Before she became the girl who survived, Emily was just a quiet teenager in a sleepy Midwestern town. She lived in a modest 2-story house with her mom, a nurse who worked night shifts, and her younger brother, Sam, who adored comic books and peanut butter sandwiches. Life was simple, ordinary, the kind of ordinary Emily often found boring, even suffocating. She dreamed of leaving, of big cities, bright lights, and a life that mattered. At school, she wasn't popular, but she wasn't invisible either. She was the girl who wrote poems in the margins of her notebook, who stayed after class to help teachers, who walked home alone because she liked the silence. There was a softness in her that the world hadn't hardened yet. But Emily also carried something deeper, a quiet sadness she rarely spoke of. Her father had left when she was 9. No goodbye, just a note on the fridge. Since then, trust was hard. She learned not to expect permanence. People left. That was just how it was. Despite it all, she was hopeful. She had plans, a journalism degree, maybe a novel one day. She believed in stories, in truth, in finding light, even in dark corners. She was 16 the night she went missing. It was a Friday. She'd gone to the library, stayed late. On her walk home, she noticed headlights behind her, slow and steady. Then, nothing. Just black. The town searched. Posters were printed. Her mother barely ate. Days passed, and then miraculously she was found, barefoot, bruised, silent. She never spoke publicly about what happened in that basement, only that she got out. Somehow. The man who took her vanished. No fingerprints, no witnesses. In the years that followed, Emily became 2 people. One who smiled, graduated, moved on, and another who never left that dark room. She built a new life, college, therapy, a tiny apartment with bookshelves she assembled herself. She learned to breathe again, to laugh, even to trust a few people. But part of her was always watching, always listening, waiting, until that day in the grocery store when her past stepped out of the shadows and looked her in the eyes. Emily always believed that stories could change the world. From the time she could hold a pen, she was writing, not just for school, but for herself. In secret journals, she captured the small tragedies and quiet hopes of the people around her. Her mother's exhaustion, her brother's wide-eyed wonder, her own aching need to matter. Her dream was clear. She wanted to be a journalist, not just one who reported the news, but one who uncovered truth, who gave voice to the unseen. She imagined herself walking into dangerous places with nothing but a notebook and the courage to ask hard questions. She idolized war correspondents, investigative writers, truth-tellers. She wasn't fearless, not by a long shot, but she believed that purpose could be bigger than fear. In school, she joined the student paper, wrote stories that made people feel something. When she won a statewide essay contest, she taped the certificate above her bed. Every night she looked at it and whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." College applications became her escape route. She researched programs late into the night, dreaming of New York, of DC, of anywhere but here. But her dreams weren't just professional. Emily wanted to feel safe, to feel known, to find someone who saw past her shyness and loved her anyway. Someone who wouldn't leave. There was a boy, Jacob, who made her laugh in history class. He had this way of looking at her like she was the only person in the room. They weren't dating, not really, just long talks after school and shared playlists. But for Emily, that was everything. He made her feel seen. For the first time, she felt like her life was unfolding, that she wasn't just surviving small-town life. She was preparing to leave it behind, to become someone. That sense of hope, of momentum, became her anchor. And then everything stopped. The night she disappeared, her future disappeared with her. The dreams of writing, of leaving, of love, all of it was put on pause, violently, without warning. When she came back, people called her strong, brave, but inside her dreams felt like ashes. The world had become dangerous, unpredictable. She no longer trusted it. She no longer trusted herself. It was supposed to be just another quiet night. Emily had stayed late at the library, finishing an article draft for the school paper. She texted her mom that she was on her way home, wrapped her scarf tighter, and stepped into the chilly evening air. The streets were almost empty, just the distant sound of a train and the soft crunch of leaves under her boots. She didn't notice the car at first, just a flicker of headlights behind her. Then again, slower this time. She crossed the street. The car did too. Her pace quickened. A voice called out, polite, calm. "Excuse me, do you know where Maple Avenue is?" She turned, half nervous, half annoyed. That's when she saw his face. Kind. Almost too kind. What happened next unraveled in seconds. A hand over her mouth. Darkness. A trunk slamming shut. She woke up in a room without windows, concrete walls, a flickering bulb overhead, and silence. Days blurred, time lost meaning. She didn't know if it was morning or night. He never showed his face fully, only his voice, his footsteps. Sometimes he spoke gently. Other times there was a chill in his tone that made her stomach twist. Emily stopped eating, stopped speaking. She pressed her ear to the wall for any sound, a car, a dog, life, nothing. One night she found a loose piece of wood near the door. It was small, sharp, desperate, trembling. She hid it beneath her shirt. When the door opened the next day, she acted. She didn't remember much, just screaming, running, blood, the sharpness in her hand, then cold air, headlights, a scream, and arms around her, voices yelling, the flashing of police lights. She was safe, but she didn't feel safe. The doctors said it was shock. The detectives asked questions she couldn't answer. The man had disappeared. No prints, no DNA, no name. Just a scar under his left eye, the only thing she remembered clearly. Back home, nothing felt real. Her room looked smaller, her bed unfamiliar. Her mother cried when she thought Emily couldn't hear. Her brother stood in the doorway, unsure if he should hug her or not. School became impossible. Crowds made her panic. Silence made her panic. Everything did. The girl who once wrote fearlessly now couldn't hold a pen without her hands shaking. The first time she tried to write again, the words didn't come, just a blank page and tears. The Emily who dreamed of stories had vanished. Now all she had were nightmares. For months after her escape, Emily lived in a kind of half-existence. Her body was home, but her mind wasn't. It had stayed in that room, frozen in time, reliving the same sounds, the same shadows. She stopped answering messages. Friends visited at first, leaving cards and flowers, but eventually they stopped coming. They didn't know what to say. No one did. Her mother tried everything, therapy appointments, warm meals, soft words, but Emily barely spoke. She stared at walls. She flinched when the doorbell rang. Some nights she screamed in her sleep, waking drenched in sweat, not knowing where she was. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the emptiness. She couldn't feel joy anymore, not even when Sam brought her favorite chocolate bar or when her old teacher sent her a handwritten letter. It was like someone had turned off the colors in her world. Everything was gray. College dreams faded into dust. Writing became impossible. Her notebooks gathered dust under the bed, untouched. She tried therapy. At first, she sat in silence while the therapist gently asked her name. After weeks, she managed a few words. Then one day she said, "I don't know who I am anymore." And it broke something open. But healing didn't come. Not then. Instead came the spiral. She began to believe the attack wasn't a chapter. It was her whole story. That she'd never be anything but the girl who was taken. When people recognized her in the grocery store, their eyes filled with pity. Whispers followed her. She hated being seen. One evening, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared for almost an hour. She didn't recognize the girl looking back. Her eyes were hollow, her frame thinner than she remembered. A deep ache settled in her chest. A grief not just for what happened, but for who she used to be. The thought came quietly, almost like a suggestion. It would be easier to just disappear. She didn't act on it, but she thought about it, more than once. What kept her from going deeper into that darkness wasn't hope, it was Sam. One night, she found a drawing he had left on her bed. It was stick figures, him and her, holding hands under a big yellow sun. He had written in shaky handwriting, "You are my hero." She broke down sobbing. Still, the weight didn't lift. She moved out, hoping space would help. A small apartment on the edge of town. She isolated even more. Days blurred into nights. She often forgot to eat. She left the TV on just to drown the silence. The anniversary of her escape came and went. Reporters called. She said nothing. She was alive, yes, but she wasn't living. She avoided mirrors, avoided parks, avoided anything that reminded her of who she had been or what she had lost. And deep down, she believed this was permanent, that the damage was forever, that her light was gone. And then something changed. Not big, not dramatic, just a moment, but enough to crack the silence. If this story is stirring something in you, a memory, a feeling, a moment of your own, take a second to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. And you never know who might feel less alone because you spoke. It started with a letter. One afternoon, in the quiet of her apartment, Emily found it wedged between a utility bill and a grocery flyer. No return address. Just her name, handwritten, the letters slightly shaky. Inside was a single page. No signature. No explanation. It read, "You survived because your story isn't over. You may not see it yet, but there is something in you the darkness couldn't take. I believe in that part of you. And please don't give up." She read it again and again. At first, she thought it was a mistake, meant for someone else, but the words, they pierced something. For the first time in months, she felt seen, not as the victim, not as the girl who vanished, but as someone who still had a future, even if she didn't know what it looked like. She placed the letter on her fridge and stared at it every morning. Something shifted after that, small things. She started making her bed. She walked around the block once a day. She even picked up one of her old notebooks, not to write, just to hold it, to remember what it had meant to her. And then, a breakthrough. Her therapist asked, as she often did, "Can you tell me something you miss about yourself?" Emily paused, then softly, "I miss believing I could change things." That night, she wrote a single sentence in her journal. "Maybe my story isn't over." The next day, she wrote another, and another. They weren't polished. They didn't sound like the old Emily, but they were hers. Honest, raw, real. For the first time since the attack, she wasn't just surviving, she was choosing to face the pain. To ask, what if healing isn't about going back, but moving forward with the scars? She revisited places she had avoided. The library, the park bench where she used to sit and write. She brought her notebook, though most days it stayed closed. It wasn't about writing, it was about reclaiming space. The letter remained a mystery. She never found out who sent it, but in many ways it didn't matter, because what mattered was what it sparked. A whisper of belief in a future she thought had died. That whisper became a voice, and that voice was hers. Healing didn't come in waves, it came in fragments. Emily's days were still quiet, still heavy, but now they had small anchors, things she did not because she felt good, but so that she might feel good someday. She set a morning routine: open the window, brew tea, write one sentence, even if it was just, "I'm still here." She started attending a writing group at the local community center. She didn't speak at first, just listened. But she liked the sound of other people telling their stories, even if they were fiction. Pain showed up between the lines, and so did strength. One night, an older woman read a poem about losing her daughter. It wasn't polished. It was raw, trembling. Afterward, Emily found herself walking up to her and saying, "That was brave." The woman smiled and touched her arm. "So are you." It was the first time in years Emily felt she belonged somewhere. She also reached out to Sam more. They started having weekly dinners. He'd bring pizza, she'd make salad. They didn't talk about the past, they just laughed, shared memories, talked about new Marvel movies and the dumb things their cat used to do. Sam never pushed. He just showed up. And that, more than anything, helped her feel real again. Her therapist noticed the change. One day she said, "You're building something again?" Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I just don't know what yet." She didn't force herself to dream big. She set simple goals: read one book a month, cook a new recipe, say yes to one thing that scared her, like speaking up in group. Each small victory became a brick in something new, a life that didn't erase her past, but didn't revolve around it either. She volunteered at a local youth center, helping teens with writing. At first, she thought she had nothing to offer. But when one girl said, "I feel like nobody understands me," Emily replied, "I've felt that way too." And the girl's eyes softened just like that. A connection was made. Emily realized something powerful. She didn't have to be healed to help. She just had to be honest. The nightmares didn't disappear. Sometimes neither did the fear. But now she had tools, a journal, a support system, a quiet inner voice that said, "Keep going." She began to believe in something she hadn't dared to before, not just survival, but possibility. Progress, Emily learned, was not a straight line. For every step forward, there were days when the ground beneath her feet gave way. The panic attacks didn't vanish. They simply changed shape. One afternoon, walking past a man in a grey hoodie, she froze. The scar, the eyes, her heart pounded like a war drum. She ducked into a store bathroom, locked the door, and sobbed on the tile floor, shaking, gasping for air. It wasn't him. But her body didn't know that. Later, she felt ashamed. "I thought I was getting better," she told her therapist. The response was soft but firm. "You are, even now, especially now." There were nights when writing felt pointless, when the blank page stared back, mocking her. Sometimes she snapped at Sam for no reason. Sometimes she avoided the youth center because the idea of being responsible for someone else's emotions terrified her. The hardest part wasn't the fear. It was the doubt. Doubt that she could ever truly move on. Doubt that her healing was real. Doubt that she wasn't broken beyond repair. Then came the day she saw the news. A woman had been found, alive, after escaping captivity. The headline was almost identical to her own story from years ago. But what struck Emily most was the footage of the woman being led to safety, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide with shock. Emily couldn't stop crying, not out of sadness, but because for the first time she didn't see herself as a victim. She saw herself as someone who had made it through. Still, not everyone around her understood. An old classmate messaged her after years of silence. "So are you, like, famous now or something?" Emily deleted the message without replying. The past wasn't a story for gossip. It was sacred. She started writing again. Not about what happened, but about what came after. About resilience, about fear, about finding peace in small things. A cup of tea, a warm laugh, a walk under soft rain. One evening at the writing group, she read a short piece aloud. Her voice trembled. Her hands shook. But she didn't stop. When she finished, the room was silent, not out of awkwardness, but respect. Then someone clapped, then another, and another. Emily looked down at her notebook, heart racing, but for the first time it wasn't from fear, it was from something else, pride. Not because she was done healing, but because she was still trying. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon. Emily was in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, comparing labels, thinking about dinner. Life had become quieter, almost steady. Not perfect, but livable. Then she saw him, a man mid-40s pushing a cart, casually placing cans into it. Something about his posture, the tilt of his head, the way he moved. It triggered something primal in her, a spark of recognition. Her heart began to pound. She told herself it wasn't possible, that it had been over 15 years, that he was gone. But then he turned slightly, and she saw it. The scar under his left eye. Everything inside her collapsed. She dropped the box of oats. Her hands trembled, her breath grew short. He looked up at the sound, met her gaze for a second, and smiled. A calm, polite smile, like he didn't remember her. Or maybe he did. Emily froze. Her mind screamed, "Run!" But something deeper, older, whispered, "No, not this time." She walked away quickly, heart racing, leaving her cart behind. But instead of heading to the exit, she went straight to customer service and asked if there was a security guard on site. "There was a man," she said, her voice shaking. I think he's someone dangerous. I need to call someone." The employee looked concerned. "Do you need us to call the police?" Emily hesitated. Her whole body was shaking. She could leave, pretend it never happened, but deep inside, something had shifted. "Yes," she said. "Call them." When the police arrived, she gave them a description. They asked her to stay, escorted her to the back of the store while they questioned the man. Minutes felt like hours. Her palms were sweaty. Her stomach turned. What if she was wrong? Then an officer returned, his face serious. "Ma'am," he said, "we need you to come down to the station. We'd like you to look at some records." Later that evening, she sat in front of a monitor looking at mugshots. Some recent, some old. When his face appeared, it hit her like a wave. "That's him," she said, her voice firm. "That's the man who took me." His name was Daniel Ross. He had changed identities multiple times, lived in different states, always staying just under the radar. Emily wasn't the only one. Over the next few weeks, the investigation uncovered evidence that linked him to at least 2 other disappearances. Survivors came forward. Families of the missing reached out. For the first time in years, there was movement, closure. But for Emily, the most profound moment came later, when she stood in a courtroom preparing to give a statement. He was there, across the room, no longer a shadow, no longer a ghost. She could feel the eyes of reporters, the tension, the weight. She took a deep breath. "My name is Emily Lane," she began. "I was 16 when you took me. You tried to erase who I was. But here I am. I built a life. I found my voice. And I will never let you take that away again." Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. She looked him in the eyes and didn't see power. She saw fear. When it was over, she stepped outside the courthouse. Reporters asked for comments. She shook her head, walked past them, and kept walking. The sky was open, the sun warm on her skin. She didn't feel broken. She felt whole. And for the first time since that basement, she felt free. Emily's story isn't about what was taken from her. It's about what she refused to let go of, her voice, her identity, her right to live, not as a victim, but as a whole, complicated, beautiful survivor. What happened to her was unimaginable. A moment of horror that fractured everything, but what followed? The years of silence, the struggle to reclaim herself, the small victories and crushing setbacks, That's where her strength was forged. Emily taught us that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about carrying it differently, with gentleness, with courage, with the quiet understanding that scars are not shameful. They're proof of survival. So many people live in the aftermath of trauma, believing they are broken beyond repair, believing they have nothing left to offer. But Emily's journey shows something powerful. Survival is not the end. It's the beginning of something new, something honest, something fiercely human. Her decision to speak, to stand in that courtroom, to look her fear in the face and say, "You don't own me anymore." That wasn't just justice. It was a reclamation of self. And in doing so, she gave permission for others to begin their own return. From silence, from shame, from the shadows. After the trial, Emily didn't disappear into quiet anonymity. She stepped into something bigger than herself. She didn't write a memoir. She didn't go on television. Instead, she went back to the youth center, the place where she first rediscovered her voice. This time, she created a program for trauma survivors who wanted to tell their stories, not for the world, but for themselves. She called it The Second Chapter. Every week, survivors came together in a small room with cheap coffee and soft lighting. They wrote letters to their past selves, scripts of the day they took their first breath after pain, pieces filled with grief, rage, hope, and truth. Emily didn't lead as an expert. She sat with them, listened, shared, and in those circles something sacred happened. Shame turned into connection. Outside the center, Emily built a quieter life. She adopted a rescue dog named Willow, started dating again slowly, cautiously. She laughed more, trusted more, slept better. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they didn't own her. One fall afternoon, walking with Sam through a park filled with yellow leaves, he asked her, "Do you think you're happy now?" She thought for a moment, smiled and said, "I think I'm finally free to be." And that was everything. What would you do if your past suddenly stood in front of you? Would you freeze, run, or finally face what once broke you? Emily's story isn't just about survival. It's about the quiet courage of rebuilding, about choosing to live, even when the weight of what happened feels too heavy. It's a reminder that healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in small steps, in brave choices, in showing up for yourself again and again. Maybe you've lived something that left a scar no one else can see. Maybe you're still carrying it. If so, let this story remind you, you are not alone, and you are not beyond healing. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where you had to face something or someone you thought was behind you? What helped you move forward? Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to read it today, and if this story moved you, help it reach others. Like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a little strength right now, because sometimes the weight of a choice is exactly what leads us back to ourselves.